Hey everyone, this is Mark Treichel with another episode of With Flying Colors. I'm here with John McKechnie and Jeff Bacino. How you guys doing?
Very well, thank you.
Very good. And we may or may not be joined by Alonzo Swann, who's having some technical difficulty. As we get into our 60s or later, sometimes hitting the right buttons isn't right. But I think so. Alonzo may be joining us here, and we'll, if that happens, we'll let you know. But guys, it's been a few months since we last chatted. A lot going on in credit unions. But in case a listener isn't aware of our previous podcasts or what you do, could you give an elevator pitch on what it is you're doing and what you used to do at NCUA? John, you go first.
Well, have been around the credit union movement for almost 40 years now. I started out with CUNA in their advocacy world, and in 2005, I joined NCUA. I was asked by Chairman Joanne Johnson to join the team as their head of congressional and public affairs, which I was in that role for 5 years and happened to be, I think, the 5 most exciting years in the industry's history with the crisis, the financial meltdown. And then since 2011, I have been out and about in DC in a private practice, trying to help credit unions navigate the DC landscape, both on the Hill and at the regulator. So to say it's never a dull moment would be an understatement.
Never a dull moment. A lot going on now. And Jeff, yourself.
Well, never a dull moment. I met John when we were at CUNA. Got out of there a little sooner than he did. I was fortunate. Bill Clinton appointed me to the NCUA board. A couple years later, George W. Bush appointed me to the Federal Housing Finance Board. In the meantime, I've had my own firm. I represent a handful of trade associations as well as a handful of credit union clients. John and I are still friends, which tells you we obviously did it right 40 years ago.
I just got a text from Alonzo. I was looking at that, but yeah, you did it right 40 years ago. But the FHFA, that's where Pulte's at, right?
It is.
So, and he's ready to take over for. Now look at, I raised my hand there somehow. I got to lower my hand. So that means you're ready to be head of all the stuff secret.
It would certainly be a bit of a stretch to say that the people I worked with when I was at the finance board would become head of artificial intelligence, but
yes, yeah, when that popped up, I thought that's interesting. I'm going to have to ask Jeff what his take on the nexus is. But anyway, so there's the big fraud case that's going on. There's two board members hoping to maybe get back in. There's one board member hoping to get out, and a third board member we think might be getting in. What do you say we talk about the NCUA board and all those tentacles first?
Let me take a stab at part of that, and I know Justin fill in the blanks. John Cruz, who is your Deputy Assistant Treasury Secretary, has been nominated by the president. There's very good likelihood he gets a confirmation hearing before the end of June. Congress is leaving for the recess on June 26th, and it sounds like he's going to get a hearing in the Senate Banking Committee June 25th. At least that's what several sources on the Banking Committee have told me. Those hearings are not publicly announced until a week before, so we haven't seen it noticed, but I think it's going to happen. I certainly expect him to be confirmed. I expect him to do well at the confirmation hearing. There's also a possibility that the president's CFPB nominee, Brian Johnson, also may be heard at the same time. And frankly, if you're John Cruz, you might like that dynamic, because I think 99% of the questions at the hearing, especially the hostile ones, are going to be directed to the other nominee. The CFPB is a much more contentious and controversial agency for the reasons I think we all know. So if that happens, I think John Cruz will get some attention, but not as much, I think, as his co-panelists at that hearing. Let's just say that. And then, of course, after he gets the hearing, the next step would be getting a vote out of the Senate Banking Committee, and then finally a vote on the Senate floor, probably sometime in July, I'm guessing.
So, go ahead, Jeff.
I'm going to say John doesn't leave many holes to fill in. He's really pretty precise, and he is here. The two things I would add, number one, is that obviously once he gets a hearing, he's going to get through pretty quickly. As John's point about CFPB is absolutely correct. I remember my confirmation hearing when I was finance board. There was the director of the Mint and then 3 Fed governors on the panel with me. I think I got 2 questions. and I think that's the same thing with John Cruz. I wrote a piece, and then I'm sometimes always concerned of who you would bring with you as your chief of staff, your policy advisor, or whatever we want to call it nowadays. And obviously that person is going to have, or hopefully will have some ground or at least some knowledge of credit unions, because even though Cruz comes with pretty extensive background, none of it is directly related to credit unions. So the ideal thing would be he comes with someone or brings someone who's got that background. The other thing is, and Mark, I don't want to steal your thunder, because this may have been the other thing, is I've read at least a couple stories that the court case in that Slaughter versus Trump may come down as early as tomorrow, which would really set something up that would be interesting if the court decides to side with the White House. Basically, that would theoretically open up 2 more seats, theoretically a Republican and Democratic seat on the board. They would then be given the authority to fire Todd and Tanya. But a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, right? And I know that we don't get into elective politics as much, but I think one of the things on the Republicans' mind for at least the rest of this year, if you're in the Senate, is while they do think they will probably hold the Senate, there's always a chance they don't. And so if you're sitting on that side and you're a Republican, you want to be thinking, let's get as many of our folks through as we can. Because frankly, if the Democrats control the Senate 2027, I see many nominees getting through.
That's all good. That's all good intel. I didn't realize that case was coming upon us.
Yeah.
I know we'd always kind of said June-ish, but here we are. So,
Mark, there have been several media reports this week. We're recording this. What is this? The 17th, right?
17th. Yep.
Yeah, there have been media reports circling June 18th is a very possible day. This term of the Supreme Court ends June 30th, so there's kind of a hard stop there. But Jeff's right. There's a lot of chatter. It's picked up quite a bit. I actually know somebody, and coincidentally know somebody who is at the Federal Trade Commission, that's the agency where the person who was fired by the president has sued, which brought this case before the Supreme Court. And this person at the FTC, while they're not guaranteed to have special inside knowledge, they probably don't get a call from John Roberts saying it's coming. But this person's agency general counsel thinks that this week is the magic week to get a decision. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does really. I mean, as you say, that very well could decide to fade whether the board members Harper and Utska get reinstated or not. There's a lot of issues. I think we all know that it's been a very contentious time for President Trump and agency appointees of the Democratic side. So we'll have to see what's going to happen. But if there are vacancies, that I just want to see a full NCUA board. Frankly, I like the business as usual. People say business as usual as a term that makes something sound mundane. I kind of want mundane right now.
Yeah, mundane would be good. Well, so the decision comes in and it supports Trump's action, and that means Otska and Harper are not coming back, and maybe that means that in Cruz there could be 2 more. The other side, which is the long shot, or believed to be the long shot, is that the court decides that Trump was wrong, and then Harper and Otska could come back.
Right.
They came back for one board meeting, right? And they were in and out based on things. So you could see things happening quickly there. And then NCUA had their 27% reduction, and you've got a lot of people that left, and there's always conjecture. I know the current executive director who took my place, Larry Fazio, has been eligible for a while. That there was always that thing when you're in the executive level is, do I want to break in another board member, right? And it's so you could have two coming back in that are feisty and ready to go. Could have Cruz wanting to lead that group with 2 Ds, or you could just have Cruz, and staff over there has got to be going, okay, which way is up and which way is down? And I see Alonzo is going to be joining us here in a second. But I mean, there's that other side of the coin where the board could go in a different direction. Hey, Alonzo, welcome to the show. We'll catch you up here in a second.
Okay, Mark. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Mark, I was also, you reminded me, NCUA has scheduled a board meeting for next week.
That's
First
right.
one since April. And that presumably could be Chairman Kyle Hauptman's final board meeting. And, I have to say, he's, I know there's a lot of smoke in the atmosphere and there's been a lot of angst. I think Chairman Haldeman, though, has kept a steady hand on the wheel. I think the agency has functioned. I saw him in front of the House Financial Services Committee for an annual regulators testimony, and I thought he did a very comprehensive job of talking about how the industry keeps on keeping on. So I think we all ought to at least pause for a second and give him kudos for a job well done there. Could not have been easy circumstances.
No doubt. And was that the presentation where he used the kids' books as props as far as education and everything? I didn't even see the speech. I saw that picture and I thought that was genius.
He did a good job.
And I don't want to cut Alonzo off here because I know he just joined, but I could say you got a second John's thought there. Kudos to him and kudos to Sarah Knapp-Bang, his director, his chief of staff. The two of them on really yeoman's work in what is not an easy situation.
Right. And that goes to, bringing someone in like Sarah who knew the industry is something that crews probably should do. So Alonzo, we talked about all the NCUA board permutations while your technical glitch was worked out. Give a quick update about what you did at NCUA or what you're doing now in the credit union world, and we'll get back into the flow here.
Absolutely. Spent 31 years with NCUA. I obviously started out as an examiner, worked my way up. Actually, was integral when we introduced and implemented Aries, and that got me to Washington as the basically the help desk for the country, and then setting up to make sure everything went right. Went from there to E&I, working to the examination and insurance department, director of a couple of offices, and then back to Chicago, and finally wrapped up as the Atlanta regional director. And for the last 13 years, I've been having the time of my life being a credit union strategist for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta. Mainly, quick nutshell, initially, just for lack of a better term, recruiting credit unions to the benefits of joining the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta. And also just trying to make sure we had a better relationship with our regulators, insurers, and everybody else in that mix, and also with your trade organizations as well, just to make sure they could spell FHLB Atlanta.
Very good. So we hit the NCUA board. Another thing that's in the news, I recently did a couple different podcasts on it, was the Jackson area Federal Credit Union conservatorship, which turned into a fraud. And I'm going to toot my own horn. When it got conserved, I looked at the numbers real closely and saw that they only had 27% loan to assets, but were borrowing a bunch of money, and they were the only credit union in the country with those stats. And I thought, I bet you there's fraud here because cash doesn't need to be this high. Why do they need cash? Well, it was because the cash was gone. I recorded that podcast, and I got a watcher of the YouTube version who said, hey, have you looked at NCUA updated the call report. Now they're showing $90 million loss, and the deficit's about $79 million. And I said, well, thanks for the heads up. I'm going to pull that down. And I recorded a follow-up podcast to that. And I'm going to be answering some questions that Frank Diekman just sent me relative to that on his website. But Alonzo, Jeff, John, a loss of $80 million, one way to look at that is a lot of the reorg money that they saved is already gone. Poof. Alonzo, with you being an RD, me being an RD, things that pop into my head is NCUA is an insurance company. They're not fraud auditors, right? You're going to have situations where the supervisory committee doesn't do the job, the auditor doesn't do the job, and you have nefarious characters, and everybody starts pointing fingers saying, hey, who's to blame here? How could have NCUA done a better job? So Alonzo, when I talk about that fraud, what pops into your head? I'm not sure if we didn't pre-talk here. I'm not sure if you'd heard about that, but any thoughts relative to that? And then I'll spin it towards Jeff and John.
Absolutely. I've heard a lot about it, and I know folk over there, so that makes it even more sobering for me, if you will. I know the NCUA folks there. In essence of, it pops up, these things pop up, and like you said, that I immediately knew as soon as that conservatorship went, the only question in my mind was how much?
How much?
It wasn't that, yeah. So I knew that was going on. Like you said, these things don't pop up, but that one indicator, and this is based on my experience, if you have a credit union, like you said, that has liquidity issues but shouldn't, that's a clue to dig deeper and figure it out. I think throughout NCUA history of the insurance fund, we've seen this thing pop up from the Nebraska issue of the 80s, non-member deposit, and to mine, it's St. Paul Croatian, I think it was. Everything was good. So I feel, and you just hate that these things pop up because it hurts the industry as well. But with internal controls, that's all I got to tell you. No way to dig deeper. And certified audits, like to have them required for everybody, but that's not the case. It's definitely a sad case. I just hate to see that for the credit union as well as everybody involved.
Not good for anybody. And Jeff, so you put your NCUA board member hat on, right? That happens, and you start getting questions from the trades. You start getting questions from the credit unions. You pick up the phone and you ask the regional director, "How in the world did this happen?" What else runs through your head as a board member?
Well, I mean, I would say the first question that runs through your head is, how did this happen? It's funny, you almost teed this up for me, because one of the groups that I represent is the Association of Credit Union Audit and Revision, so known as ACUR, which used to be known as the Association of Credit Union Internal Auditors. And obviously, so my work with them just kind of opened my eyes a little bit to, first of all, the need for effective internal controls, as Alonzo just said, which again, in a lot of these credit unions just doesn't happen. I mean, if you look at this one, we basically had the CEO handling everything, couldn't even post it, which really then opens up the door for some fraud. I do agree with you. I mean, NCUA as an insurer and regulator, and with the staff cuts, they find it tough to point the finger at them. And this is, again, one of those cases that I always like to say, I use the Willie Swift analogy, is that when they asked him why he robbed the banks, and John knows this, that's what money was. And so, do that. It's again, just to me, it's a call for better and more robust internal controls. And really, your credit union has an internal audit department, because a lot of them are now starting to farm them out to external firms. It's a nice way to go, but the reality is it's nice to have someone in-house whose job it is to keep an eye on that.
Great point. Great point. That's a good, I didn't tee that up intentionally, but that's a great organization and a great role that you guys play, and then those people as part of that association play in credit unions. John, from the public affairs perspective, what pops into your head?
Well, obviously it's a disaster from a PR standpoint, unless it's handled correctly, which I think, at this point, I've heard a lot from Mississippi sources that the word has gotten out very quickly that your money, your insured deposits are safe. It's a black eye, and the remedial steps that Alonzo and Jeff just talked about, I think, are going to have to be implemented sooner rather than later. But for the time being, just stopping the hemorrhaging. This is the triage, so to speak, where you try to keep people, calm, make sure they understand that their funds are safe, make sure that the credit union continues to function. It's a bad situation. I will say there's also a lot of rumors running around Mississippi that several people tried to flag what appeared to be inconsistent or suspicious type activity around the credit union, and it really didn't get heated until it was too late.
I heard the same.
Yeah, and if that's true, that really hurts. That's a sad indictment of a lot of different 360-degree blame in that.
Well, and then of course, when there's a loss this big, the inspector general gets to do one of their reviews. MLR, material loss review,
right?
And that one could get interesting, and then it comes into what type of things should NCUA do, and then where's NCUA at on their staffing levels and all that. So there's all those, the pendulum part of it all.
I would just add, Mark, on top of that, when I was working on the Hill, I was a press secretary, and our newspaper editor once said to me something I've never forgotten, which is, he said, the best guarantee of right thinking is the presence of the sheriff. And I think it's a good idea to make sure that people realize that the sheriff is looking over your shoulder. And if in this case, I don't know what the credit union supervisory committee did or didn't do. I don't know what happened in terms of the examination process, but I think having an obvious presence looking over your shoulder might have mitigated some of this. And I don't know, maybe something fell through the cracks there. I don't know what happened.
Well, with COVID not being on site as much, and then not having as much staff, it's the empty cop car, right, that makes you slow down, and you go, oh gosh, there's nobody in that car, but showing up does that.
Yeah.
Very good. Alonzo, any wrap on what we just said there as it relates to that situation?
Absolutely. Just to close on that, and just to hear on what John said, yeah, having that on-site presence, you can't beat it. You prefer the local examiner because they can see, smell sometimes that if you go to the casino, you might see folk there that shouldn't be there, or you see the CEO driving around in a car that you're wondering how they paid for it. So those are all the things that you get with continuity of group. Jackson's a pretty good hub for examiners.
Sure.
Biggest one in Mississippi, including the supervisory examiner. So, yeah, we live and learn, but I can tell you, material loss review, there's always going to be a learning lesson. That's what I call pointing the finger at somebody. So,
Yeah. And trademarks. Yeah. And trademarks.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the regional director isn't there, so that person doesn't have to take the fall. It's that old joke when you get a new job, they give you 3 envelopes, right? And when you screw up the first time, what do? You grab the envelope and it says, blame the guy 2 before you. And the second one, you screw up, you open it up, blame the guy before you. And the third one, you screw up, you open it up, it says, time to prepare 3 envelopes. That's what they told me when I became executive director. Anyway, I walked on water by looking for the rocks for about 8 years before I decided to join you all in the brighter side of things. All right, so that's enough on that. So we talked about the board. John, you mentioned there's some banking legislation or some things going on. Anything relative to that you want to highlight?
Well, the Senate and the House looked like they had come to an agreement. It all kind of came together quickly. Some people didn't think it would happen, but this is about the 21st century housing bill that, while it's not a credit union focused bill, credit unions do get the credit union board modernization provision in that legislation, which I think is going to reach the president next week. And that's kind of a good common sense. It's not a real sexy issue. It's not high profile. Board modernization essentially means that you don't have to have a board meeting every month. You can have one every 6 months. I'm sorry, you have 6 times a year. I misspoke. 6 times a year, every other month or whatever, as long as you have one per quarter. And you have to be a very healthy credit union to take advantage of that flexibility. But if you qualify, it's going to be, I think, real regulatory relief in terms of, from what I've heard, the staff are already popping champagne corks that they don't have to do all that work.
Just like at NCUA, they don't meet, they do everything by a notation vote. So NCUA is kind of channeling the way that they're doing things. That's interesting. Yeah. I think it's a good thing. I hadn't followed that, but that's good to know.
It is a good thing. I will also complain a little bit on the side. The bank's got a lot of provisions in this legislation. Chairman of the House Financial Services Committee is a guy named Treichel, who's a very well-respected guy. His background is as a community banker. His family's community banking family. He has a real focus on the community banking industry. He had a hearing last year, make community banking great again, as in a nod to the president. Credit unions really have not had as much of a profile in that, and I think that's a shame, and I wish we had, and I hope we can persuade Chairman Hill and others on the Hill that maybe, credit unions deserve a fresh look at regulatory relief as well, that it's not just for banks. I don't care one way or the other if the banks get some regulatory relief. But I think credit unions, if they do get the amount that they got this time, credit unions deserve a place in that too, I think.
A great point. And Jeff, anything on that you want?
No, I think John's point is pretty well taken. Banks continue to kind of outpace us in legislation. I don't think it's trying. I mean, people are working, but it just seems to be kind of a prevailing image on the Hill, German Hill, being a community banker. It's been something we battled for years in terms of it. As we move forward, and again, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of legislation. We talked in these podcasts, gridlock in Washington. Gridlock starts at the top, obviously, go closer to the bank. It'll be interesting to see moving forward. So again, to put too fine a point, November is going to be an interesting time to move elective politics. Hoping we'll have at least 1 or 2 of these before November. But at this point, it looks like shaking things up always makes it interesting. And
Yeah, great point. Great point. So those are the different topics I had, and we didn't really kind of develop an agenda here. But Jeff, is there anything going on that you want, any particular topic you kind of want to vet here as we get into the last quarter of the show?
no, I think that John Cruz coming over as a board member is of huge importance. The Supreme Court case coming out in the next couple of weeks could be huge. I put in a little commercial for my association that I run. Their conference is next week in Chicago. Their keynote speaker is a guy that I'm sure you've heard of, Mark, and I know John has, getting Mike Singletary. So if you're, you may not air this before then, but if you do, and you're in the Chicago area and you're an internal auditor, please think about coming.
This episode's going out Monday. They can sign up late. Mike Singletary,
Either Tuesday,
right? Well, and maybe is Singletary coming out of retirement to help that Bears defense? And what are you predicting for the Bears this year?
Oh, my prediction would be pretty similar to what I did last year. I think we can win I think we win the division.
Okay, very good, very good.
You can do it
Do it what? In exciting fashion.
it ain't bragging.
If you do it,
Can I mention something that I wanted to kind of backtrack on before?
Yes.
Before I step aside for Alonzo, I know Alonzo's always got something interesting to say, but I was going to say earlier, I talked about John Cruz's confirmation hearing and how the CFPB, if there is a CFPB nominee up there with him, he's going to get a lot of questions. Having said that, I want to step back and say, if John Cruz does get a lot of questions, I've seen him speak before crediting a group, very competent, great educational background. You can tell he's very seasoned on the regulatory side, had a command of things and this is at the Government Affairs Conference back in, I guess, late February, before he'd been nominated. He was at the time Deputy Assistant Secretary, but he's very well qualified for this. I think if he does step into this role soon, Craig's will be very pleased with what they see.
That's good to hear. And any Ravens predictions? 10-7, 7-10.
Well, I said I think last year we were going to have a pretty good season, then choke at the end, and then I've no reason to think that's not going to happen again. I'll sit through it like I do every year, but that's
very good. All right, Alonzo, what do you got on the Atlanta Falcons, and or anything else in the credit union land?
Atlanta Falcons are going to be good this year, but don't forget, I'm like Jeff. I'm from Chicago. I root for the Falcons and when they're playing, but I'm a Bear fan at heart. I'm on borrowed time. Put that in perspective because I asked God to let me live to see the Cubs win the World Series. So I'm on overtime right now because they won it. They ain't won nothing since. But Falcons gonna do good, and looking forward to it. They should have, if nothing else, they're gonna be an exciting team.
They should be, yeah. A lot of offensive weapons. And we gonna call them the Indianapolis Bears pretty soon, or just the Chicago? The Chicagoland area. Now, I never heard that before. The Chicagoland area.
That's called the New York Giants and Jets. They're not.
It's a sore subject.
And last year I was talking about the J.J. McCarthy era, which is now over. With that, guys, thank you. As always, I enjoyed this. I learned a few things. This episode will be going out Monday, so we'll still be fresh. And we'll do this again within the next 3 months and one more time before November. All right, guys?
Thanks for having me.
You got it. And listeners, watchers, I want to thank you for listening. This is Mark Treichel, signing off with flying colors.